Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk, the podcast brought to you by Southern Vermont Area Health Education Center, or AHEC. I'm your host, Peg Bulgioni, and today we've got a conversation you won't want to miss. If you're new to the show, AHECs are national nonprofit organizations committed to growing and supporting our health workforce, especially in rural and underserved areas. For the past few episodes, we've been diving deep into the topic of equity, and today we're continuing that important discussion. We'll be focusing on how higher education and the principles of equity kind of fold into some of the programs that the colleges might be doing. I'm thrilled to be joined today by two guests from Vermont State University at Castleton. Michael Reeves, the Director of Social Work Programs, and Margaret Miles, an Assistant Professor of Social Work. Together, we'll be unpacking these crucial questions and exploring how we can create a lasting change. So get comfortable and stay with us as we dig into this fascinating and important topic. So let's get started. So again, welcome to both of you. I'm so pleased you could join us today, and I'm going to start the conversation. So, Michael, I wanted to direct this to you. How does incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion principles into college coursework help students develop the skills needed for success in today's diverse workforce?
Peg, let me start by saying thank you for inviting us to be part of your podcast. Look forward to the conversation that we're going to have. This is a unique opportunity that I think Professor Miles and I are looking forward to. So let me speak first to social work because obviously that's where our experience is. And, diversity, equity, and inclusion are deeply embedded in social work values, social work pedagogy. So all of the courses that we teach in the social work program have DEI content. The courses have it embedded. The program has it embedded. The university has it embedded as well, and has made a commitment to the principles of what we call DEI SJ, social justice, to be added to the end of it. So we are always engaging our students in understanding equity from a number of different perspectives. And as a professional program, we're preparing our students to go immediately into the workforce following graduation. Students that take our program graduate with a bachelor's of social work, and that is a nationally recognized and nationally accredited degree. And so if you're here now and taking your courses and you decide that you're going to live in the Midwest, people will understand that, what the BSW trained potential employee brings to the table. And part of that is an understanding of DEI. And so, I think that if our students are going to explore the world and go out and be leaders and change the world in other places, they are going to run into all kinds of different diversity, whether that be racial and ethnic, or religious, or LGBTQ status. The work is going to involve interacting with people from diverse backgrounds, and providing those people with equitable opportunities and equitable services is an important part of what professional social work is. I also think that, being around here where there may not be as much racial and ethnic diversity, there still is a lot of other forms of diversity that our students, when they go into the workforce, will be interacting with. And if we don't talk about those things through their professional training, through their coursework, they're gonna be, struggle to possibly interact with people that they may have never interacted with before. So not only do we give them the theoretical background on DEI practices, but also through our field placements, which is part of social work. They get the opportunity to practice that, and they get the opportunity to get feedback on that before they graduate, before they get out into the workforce. So I think we're setting them up for success.
Excellent. Well said, Michael. Margaret, what are some of the specific DEI focused assignments or projects that can foster critical thinking and empathy, preparing students for inclusive workplace environment?
Yeah, well, again, I'll take this from a social work perspective, but as Michael mentioned, our accrediting organization, the Council on Social Work Education, has some pretty explicit directives about how we incorporate DEI education and awareness with our students. And so this is work that we think about how we're going to incorporate into our curriculum, both implicitly and explicitly, and really want to tie to students' real world experiences as well. So one of the courses I teach, for example, right now is our social work capstone class. And that is a class for our senior students who are doing their 400-hour field placement at a local agency or nonprofit. And one of their culminating assignments in that class is they have to write a paper about their agency. Or I'm sorry, this actually happens in our practice class, in our practice 2 class. And so they need to write sort of a critical review of their agency. So they provide, some very basic information about the mission and values of their agency, how big the agency is, how the agency's staffed, the budget, some pretty straightforward information like that. But then we also ask them to be critical, right? And consider how is their agency practicing principles of DEI? Do they consider their agency to be anti-racist? And what evidence of that do they have? And so we're really asking students to see and experience how DEI plays out in the workplace as their students. And we really try to provide a supportive environment. So if they notice something and they're concerned about speaking up or they're concerned about saying something, we're able to workshop that in class with them and say, okay, well, if you're concerned about this, who do you think you should go to first? Have you asked this person about that policy? Have you asked that person? So I think a huge part of making students feel confident and comfortable with these principles is making sure that the classroom first is a safe place for them to have these discussions. Another assignment I can think about is in a class that we require of all of our social work majors, which is discrimination in American society. And in that class, we ask them to consider what forms of discrimination are they seeing. So we have an assignment called Discrimination in the News, where each week a different student presents a current news article about some form of discrimination. And we ask them to consider, how is this discrimination impacting folks at the individual level? How is it impacting folks at the family and community level? And if in fact this discrimination is going on, are there potential policies or laws that would help alleviate this discrimination? So we're always trying to get students to think about this sort of work sort of across the 3 levels that we talk a lot about in social work, being the micro, meso, and macro levels of practice. And again, wanting to use some concrete real world examples for them to have those discussions.
This is very interesting. And I'm learning so much from what you're both are saying. And I think a lot of this should be applicable to everyday life, what you're teaching in these classes. And this kind of brings me to the next question, Michael, is how can integrating this DEI content across different disciplines, from the humanities to STEM, equip students with the tools to address workforce challenges related to diversity?
Well, I think similar to the answer that I gave you to your initial question, Peg, is that while we are specifically working on integrating DEI content into the social work curriculum, the university is working on incorporating that into right now the general ed curriculum as well. So students in all of these different disciplines are going to be getting content in DEI whether that be helping students to, one of the primary ways is like helping students to understand how there are diverse people who have had major impacts on different fields that oftentimes don't get the credit. Like it comes back to me, the movie Hidden Figures, and just thinking about all of the people of color that had major roles in major technological advances for our country, that were not oftentimes spoken about because the majority of the textbooks and the majority of the theorists and that are mentioned in those textbooks tend to be white men. So there's a movement to do that across all of the disciplines, from the humanities to STEM, like you talk about, and doing that in the classroom. And I also have to say, my conversations with my colleagues in the education field, my colleagues in the nursing fields. I don't want to leave anybody out, but almost everybody is saying, yeah, we need to train our students in DEI concepts because they are, the workforce is becoming more and more diverse, and we want to equip our students with those tools regardless of what discipline they're in.
Well, that's exactly right. And Margaret, I know Michael may have already said some of this, but you can certainly underscore it again, or I'm sure you've got other thoughts that you want to add. But what role does faculty training play in DEI, in creating a
Yeah.
more inclusive curriculum?
Yeah, like Michael mentioned, I think, Vermont State University has made this commitment to ensuring that DEI and social justice are part of our general education curriculum. They're also recognizing that that can't happen overnight and that faculty need training in this area. So both Michael and I were involved this past summer in a professional development opportunity that was all about incorporating DEI in the gen ed. And it was a really neat opportunity because we were put in interdisciplinary teams and then asked to consider a general education course that we teach and how we can improve the DEI content within that course or curriculum. And I think what I appreciated about that opportunity was actually working with people who were in a completely different discipline. I happened to work with someone who was within our communications department. So not necessarily a discipline where right away you think of, oh yeah, they must be on the forefront of DEI. But I have to give my colleague a lot of props because she certainly is, and she's been thinking about ways in which it's important to incorporate those principles into her communication classes. So I think, training is really important. It's also really important, and I think to model, principles of cultural humility. So, being comfortable saying what you don't know and not feeling like you need to be an expert on all topics for your student, but be willing to investigate and discover with them. Cultural humility is a principle that's a little bit different than the traditional concept of cultural competence. Cultural competence is more this idea of, maybe you learn about a culture by reading a chapter in a book or going to a workshop, and that helps increase your understanding, which is wonderful. But cultural humility goes sort of a step further, and it's more about this lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique, where individuals don't only learn about somebody else's culture, but you're also examining your own beliefs, standpoints, identities, and thinking about that, how that impacts your interaction with other people around you. So I think that, faculty have a real responsibility to model that principle, and to acknowledge potentially mistakes that they've made or missteps that they've taken. We're all human, and this work, if you're really digging into it, can sometimes be hard and challenging, and mistakes are going to happen. So modeling for your students what to do in situations like that, and to not put the pressure on yourself to be the expert on all things, because you truly can't be, right? But you can be sort of a culturally humble guide through the process, I would say.
And
Well, I
Margaret, I
mean,
have to
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You mind if I add something to that?
No,
I
please.
don't know if you want to.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was just going to say that, again, coming from the social work profession, we are moving away from the term cultural competence towards cultural humility, because as Margaret said, it's that commitment to lifelong learning, but it's also, cultural competence can be a challenging kind of like, oh my, I have to become competent, and it's there's lots of different cultures, there's lots of different diversity out there that we want our students to feel comfortable with, as Margaret was saying, not always knowing, and going into an interaction with a client, whether that be an individual, a family, an agency, a community, from the perspective of I'm here to learn about your culture. And it's, as Margaret said, it's not enough to, I present my students with a case study about cultural humility, and the person in that case study read a couple of books on Native American culture, and did a ride along through the reservation that the Native Americans were living on, and felt that he was culturally competent. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to move away from, and be you need to be a learner about culture when you're interacting with people that are different.
Well, it's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Margaret, did you want to add to that?
Nope.
Okay. One of the things I just wanted to bring up is, do you think that this should start earlier with young people? The whole concept of diversity, equity, because I don't know. I mean, I know that it's more intentional in colleges, but I don't know if it's happening before that. Do you know that, or what are your thoughts?
I think personally, this is me speaking.
Mhm.
That it should be taught earlier. That I think that it can only benefit our young people to understand and respect difference. I think that's one of the big problems that we're facing in society today, is that people, if you're different than them, then you're wrong. And we can't have a successful society based on those concepts. So especially in areas of the country where there's not that much diversity. Sometimes, in school, it can be the only place where they get some exposure to that. And then, so say a student finishes high school and goes to college in a much more diverse area, rather than it being such a shock with the type of diversity they may see, they've learned about it a little bit. And I think, I think that would make them better college students, and eventually better employees in the workforce.
Yeah, one thing
Margaret?
I would add is that I teach our incoming first year students, and I've noticed a huge range of students' comfort with this topic. So I think, based on my very small sample size of incoming first years that we work with, it's pretty clear to me that, even students within Vermont are getting wildly different preparation in this area in high school based on where they're going to high school and which teachers they have, et cetera. So, I think that's a challenge when we do welcome these university students, is acknowledging that people really have a pretty wide range of comfort with this as a topic. I think that can actually work to our advantage. When I think about talking about these things with first year students in particular, and recognizing that there's just such a wide range of comfort, oftentimes it's students who are able to sort of get through to their other students about issues or topics. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but just anecdotally, I've noticed that there's a wide range of comfort and experience when students do start at the university level.
As you talk with your colleagues who work at other institutions, do they? I mean, they obviously are they initiating similar programs, around integrating DEI education into their curriculum? Have they talked about outcomes that they've seen in terms of student preparedness for a diverse and global workforce?
Well, Margaret and I both attend national conferences, but for social work. So,
Mhm.
and the social work faculty around the country are as committed to DEI as ever. As you said, no matter where those schools are, preparing them for a diverse workforce. I think that different schools are facing different challenges depending on what part of the country they're in. I've been really impressed sitting and listening to the continued commitment and the creative ways to continue to get this content into the curriculum, even given some of the challenges and some of the pushback nationally.
Do you think it's a harder sell in Vermont because we we are one of the whitest states in the country?
No, I actually think it's an easier sell in Vermont. I remember being at a conference and saying, "Thank God I live in Vermont, where I work for a university where this is part of who we are. I live in a state where this is from the legislature down is who Vermonters see themselves as, respectful of other people." So I think it's actually easier being here than it would be in other parts of the country, even in other parts of New England. I think it's an easier sell in Vermont.
Margaret, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I would definitely agree with Michael, and it's really eye-opening when we do go to these national conferences and you hear, professors in Florida, for example, who are concerned that the phrase DEI can't even appear in their syllabus. That's a much different environment than Michael and I are working in, which we're grateful for. Yet at the same time, right, if that's happening in neighboring institutions, I think it's our responsibility as a discipline to make sure that this is happening as much as it can, regardless of sort of receptiveness within your respective state.
Well, I know we're getting to the end of our time, but I wanted to make sure that if either of you had any final thoughts to add to the conversation, you're more than welcome to speak up.
Peg, I wanted to go back.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I wanted to go back to the assignment question that you asked about. Margaret talked about classroom assignments. For social work, the signature pedagogy, the way that we know that we get the content across to our students, is in the practicum, out at agencies, out doing this work. Social work has students do 400 hours in their senior year at human services agencies. And so when we're talking, Margaret was talking about the competencies that specifically two of them talk about: advancing human rights and social, racial, economic, and environmental justice, and engaging in anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those competencies, along with the other 7 that we have 9 total competencies that guide our curriculum, are taught in the classroom, taught in the placements, and assessed for how the students are doing with those topics. And so not only are we we can do the best that we can with having these discussions in the classroom, maybe even doing role plays and doing some really good back and forth discussion, but we're getting our students out there into the work world and then having these discussions about, like, for environmental justice, for instance. I was talking with my student the other day about something simple, just like, do you see recycling bins around your agency? And encouraging them. I mean, that's an easy one, right? The student might feel a little bit more scared to talk to somebody about, I saw a member of the faculty kind of interact inappropriately with a client. But those are the kinds of things that we're teaching and then having them practice out in the agencies, and then getting feedback from their supervisor, who's a staff person of the agency, and from a member of the faculty on a regular basis. And so again, that feedback is embedded directly into the real life experience and preparation for the workforce that we're giving our students.
All right. Margaret, did you want to add something?
Well, Michael just kind of set me up beautifully in terms of workforce development. One thing I did want to mention was Vermont State University's trauma certificate, which I think is really connected to this topic of equity that we're discussing today. It's a certificate that's designed for people who will be working in fields like law enforcement, nursing, social work, education. And it's a certificate designed either for our undergraduate students or working professionals. And the curriculum focuses on the structural nature of trauma, ways in which trauma is manifested, and ways to promote self-care for professionals who work with individuals experiencing trauma. So it's a really excellent certificate program that draws from several of our programs that really have made this commitment to DEI and social justice work. So just wanted to let folks know about that as an option. Again, both for, it doesn't just have to be VTSU students, but working professionals who want to have a bit more focus in trauma